We like to believe we are masters in our own homes, that our thoughts, our beliefs, and above all, our actions, are products of a conscious and rational will. We are individuals. But as Carl Jung warned us, the psyche is not so simple. Beneath the thin layer of our consciousness, the persona we present to the world, there exists a vast ocean, the unconscious. And in this ocean, in the part closest to our consciousness, resides the shadow. The individual shadow is a concept many have begun to explore. It is the psychic bag where we throw everything we reject in ourselves. Our inadequacies, our envy, our cruelty, our greed. It is the I we do not want to be, the Dr. Jekyll hidden in every Hyde. Jung was clear, the shadow is not necessarily evil. It is just unconscious. It contains gold as much as it contains darkness. The work of life, individuation, is to bring this shadow to light, to integrate it, and to become whole. It is a painful but necessary work, for as he said, that which you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate. But what happens when this darkness is not just ours? What happens when the psychic bag belongs to a family, a community, an entire nation? Jung did not stop at the individual. He delved deeper, beyond the personal unconscious, and found the collective unconscious, the psychic inheritance of all humanity, composed of archetypes, the mother, the hero, the wise old man, and also the shadow. It is here that we find our theme today, a concept of terrifying power and danger, the collective shadow. The collective shadow is the sum of all individual shadows in a group. It is the darkness that an entire nation refuses to see in itself. It is the repository of all inferiority, unprocessed guilt, and the potential for cruelty that a society fiercely projects outside. While the individual shadow leads us to internal conflicts and projections in our relationships, the collective shadow, it leads us to scapegoats, to systemic prejudice, to mass hysteria, and in its most catastrophic manifestation, to war. It is the monster that lives not under the bed, but within the parliament, within the public squares, within our invisible borders. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. On the contrary, it feeds on our denial. The more civilized, just, and moral a group proclaims itself to be, the darker and heavier the shadow it casts. In this video, we will do what society refuses to do. We will look directly into this abyss. We will dissect how the collective shadow is formed, how it manifests in our prejudices and our conflicts, and why, now more than ever, understanding this concept is not an academic exercise, but a matter of survival. If you are ready for this journey into the depths of the human psyche, this difficult but essential exploration, then prepare yourself. The path is dark, but it is the only path to the light. To understand the immensity of the collective shadow, we must first understand its fundamental building block, the individual shadow. Every one of us, without exception, spends our life building an identity. We call this the ego. The ego is the center of consciousness, and for this ego to feel cohesive, secure, and above all, good, it must reject parts of itself. If you were taught that being angry is unacceptable, your anger goes into the shadow. If you were taught that being vulnerable is weak, your vulnerability goes into the shadow. The shadow thus becomes the repository of all our unlived human potential. It is an other within us. And how do we deal with this other? We project it. We see our own denied arrogance in a co-worker. We see our own repressed greed in a politician. We see our own despised weakness in one we consider inferior. It is a primitive defense mechanism. It is easier to hate something in another than to accept it in myself. Now, imagine this mechanism multiplied by millions. The collective shadow operates analogously, but on an exponentially more dangerous scale. It is not just the sum of individual shadows. It is a psychic entity that feeds back on itself. When a group of people unites, whether by a flag, a religion, an ideology, or a social class, it creates a collective ego, a group identity. And just like the individual, this group needs a shadow to define what it is not. If we are the civilized, we need barbarians. If we are the pure, we need the heretics. If we are the honest workers, we need the vagrants. The collective shadow is the psychic mass grave of a culture. It is where a nation throws its historical failures, its unadmitted guilts, its founding atrocities. Think of a nation's relationship with its history of slavery, or with its past genocides. What is not processed, mourned, and integrated does not disappear. It becomes part of this dense, reactive shadow. The great difference, and the great danger, is that the individual shadow is contained, in a way, by individual consciousness. An individual can, through great effort and pain, go to therapy, reflect, and withdraw their projections. They can own their shadow. But how does a group do this? How does an entire nation go to therapy? The collective shadow is diffuse. No one owns it, and therefore, no one is responsible for it. It manifests through tacit consensus, through unquestioned truths, through jokes, laws, and economic systems. It becomes just the way things are. And when an individual within that group dares to point to this shadow, dares to say, wait, maybe the problem is us, they are not seen as a therapist, but as a traitor. They are threatening the very cohesion of the group's ego. The collective shadow, therefore, is stickier, more primitive, and much harder to bring to light than the individual shadow. It is the fractured mirror where each shard reflects our denial, but the whole reflects a monster that no one dares to name. When the tension of the collective shadow becomes unbearable, the group psyche seeks an escape valve. The accumulated darkness must be deposited somewhere. If the group cannot or will not do the hard work of looking inward and admitting its own guilt, its own inferiority, it will do the next easiest thing: find someone to carry this burden. This is the birth of the other. This is the mechanism of projection on a mass scale, and its most tragic result is the scapegoat. The term, of course, is ancient, biblical. An animal was richly burdened with the community's sins and then driven into the wilderness. Taking the guilt with it, the community, feeling purified, could move on without ever having to change. Psychologically, the mechanism remains identical. The collective shadow, filled with all the anxiety, fear, anger, and incompetence that the group does not admit, is projected onto a minority group, a neighbor, an ideological heretic. This target group is then systematically dehumanized. They are no longer seen as complex individuals as us, but as a monolithic receptacle for everything we despise. Notice how the language changes. The scapegoated group is described in subhuman terms. They are vermin, rats, plagues, unclean. This is the collective shadow in action, trying to justify the hatred that is, in fact, a projected self-hatred. The dominant group, by attacking the scapegoat, feels a perverse relief, a sense of justice and moral superiority. By cleansing the world of the scapegoat, they are, symbolically, cleansing themselves of their own unbearable shadow. This is what fuels witch hunts. It is what fueled the anti-Semitism in pre-war Germany, where Jews were forced to carry the shadow of German economic and military humiliation. It is what fuels racism, where one group is forced to carry the shadow of intellectual or moral inferiority that the dominant group secretly fears in itself. The scapegoat mechanism is a false catharsis. It is a release of tension that solves nothing. In fact, it only reinforces the shadow, as it adds another crime, that of unjust persecution, to the unprocessed collective guilt. The group becomes addicted to this cycle. It must perpetually find new scapegoats to maintain its illusion of purity. If you have ever participated in an online debate and felt that rush of righteous pleasure in joining with others to cancel or destroy the reputation of someone who represents everything you hate, you have tasted the collective shadow and the scapegoat mechanism. It is a powerful temptation, as it offers a simple solution to a complex problem. It tells us that evil is out there, in the other, and that to purify the world, we need only eliminate this other. It is the most dangerous lie a society can tell itself. And it is a lie that the collective psyche, lazy and fearful of self-knowledge, is always willing to believe. If you recognize this mechanism in the world around you, or perhaps in moments of honesty within yourself, leave a like, not as a celebration, but as an acknowledgement of the complexity we are facing. If the scapegoat is the act of discharging the shadow, prejudice is the structure that justifies that act. Prejudice is not just an ignorant prejudgment, as the word suggests. In the Jungian view, prejudice is the psychic architecture of the collective shadow. It is the shadow sedimented, rationalized, and transformed into policy, into economics, into culture. It is unconscious hatred transformed into common sense. Let's analyze how this works. When a collective shadow is projected onto a group for long enough, the projection begins to create its own reality. The dominant group doesn't say, "I feel lazy and incompetent, so I will project this onto you." It says, "That group is inherently lazy and incompetent." The shadow disguises itself as objective observation. It creates stereotypes. The stereotype is the mask that the collective shadow forces the scapegoat to wear. And what is most sinister? The dominant group then creates systems that force the target group to conform to the stereotype. Think of a group upon which the shadow of illegality or violence has been projected. This group will be over-policed. Its members will receive harsher sentences. Opportunities for education and employment will be denied to them. The system, itself a manifestation of the collective shadow, creates the conditions for the shadow's self-fulfilling prophecy to come true. Society then points to the resulting crime statistics and says, "See, we were right. They really are violent." Prejudice is the collective shadow congratulating itself on its own insight. It is a closed loop of projection and false confirmation. Racial prejudice, class prejudice, misogyny, homophobia, they are all manifestations of the same archetypal dynamic. They are a society's refusal to integrate its own shadows. Patriarchal society, for example, projects its shadow of irrationality and hysteria, the unintegrated anima potential in the man, onto women. A society obsessed with material success projects its shadow of failure and worthlessness onto the poor. Prejudice is, therefore, the strongest defense of the collective ego. It provides a complete belief system, often supported by pseudoscience or distorted theology, that justifies exclusion, exploitation, and violence. It allows members of the dominant group to maintain their positive self-image, their clean conscience, while participating in acts of cruelty. The individual who grows up within this structure doesn't even need to decide to be prejudiced. They absorb the collective shadow with the air they breathe. For them, this is not hatred, it is reality. Dismantling prejudice, therefore, is not just a matter of educating people with facts. Facts rarely penetrate such a powerful psychic defense. Dismantling prejudice requires what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow. It requires the dominant group to look in the mirror and ask, "That which I hate in the other, is it not, in fact, that which I cannot stand in myself?" It is the most painful and the most necessary question. When the scapegoat mechanism and the structure of prejudice are taken to their absolute extreme, we have war. War, from the perspective of depth psychology, is the catastrophic and total failure of integration. It is the volcanic eruption of the collective shadow in its purest and most destructive form. It is a blood ritual where the shadow, long suppressed, is finally unleashed without restraint. But with the blessing of the state, religion, and culture, nationalism is the primary facilitator of this process. Healthy nationalism, the love of one's place and culture, can be a cohesive force, but inflated nationalism, the kind that defines us as inherently superior to them, is the perfect tool for the collective shadow. It functions as a psychic amplifier. The nationalist leader or ideology tells the people, "You are not just good, you are the best. You are the pure race, the chosen nation, the beacon of freedom. Everything good that exists resides in you." This is the inflation of the collective ego. And what is the inevitable consequence of this inflation? A proportionally dark shadow. The brighter the light of our self-perception, the darker the shadow we project. The enemy nation, the neighboring country, the opposing ideological bloc becomes the receptacle for the entire shadow. They are no longer just different. They are the embodiment of absolute evil. They are the barbarians threatening our civilization. They are the demons threatening our faith. Once this projection is complete, war becomes not only acceptable, but necessary. It becomes a moral duty, a holy crusade. The soldiers on the field are not killing other human beings. They are killing projections of their own shadow. They are exterminating the evil that, in truth, resides in their own collective unconscious. This is why the acts committed in war are of a barbarity that shocks the individual conscience in times of peace. War is a state of archetypal possession. The individual is dissolved into the collective, and the collective is possessed by the shadow. The rational I disappears, and the primitive we takes control. Jung, writing during the rise of Nazism, saw this clearly. He saw how an entire nation, one of the most cultured and philosophical in the world, could regress to a state of primitive hysteria. The archetype of Wotan, the ancient Germanic god of fury and storm, had been awakened. The collective shadow had found its myth. War, therefore, is the shadow acting in the real world, using tanks, bombs, and the flesh of young men as its instruments. And the most tragic part? Even after the destruction, the shadow is rarely integrated. The victor projects the entirety of the shadow onto the vanquished, declaring themselves the bearer of justice. The vanquished, humiliated, buries their own shadow, where it mixes with resentment, waiting for the next opportunity to erupt. It is a cycle that breaks only when a nation has the unimaginable courage to do what the individual must do: recognize its own capacity for evil, recognize that the enemy it just destroyed was, in many ways, a reflection of itself. One of the most dangerous concepts in Jungian psychology is psychic inflation. At the individual level, it is when the ego identifies with an archetype. It is the man who believes he is the hero, the sage, or, in the worst cases, God himself. He loses his grip on human reality and is inflated, like a balloon, by a power that is not his. This person becomes arrogant, dogmatic, and dangerously blind to his own flaws, blind to his shadow. Now, apply this to a group. Collective psychic inflation is what happens when a nation or an ideological group identifies with the archetype of light, truth, or good. This is, paradoxically, the moment when the collective shadow becomes most powerful. For the more a group insists on its own moral purity, the more darkness it must repress and project. History is replete with these examples. Think of the Inquisition, a group that identified so completely with the will of God that it gave itself permission to commit the most sadistic and shadowy acts in the name of this light. Torture was not seen as cruelty, the shadow, but as an act of love to save the heretic soul. The shadow, when projected, always rationalizes itself with the language of virtue. Think of the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. Communism, in its theory, sought the utopia of equality. Inflated by this archetype of absolute justice, it projected its shadow onto the class enemy, the bourgeois, the intellectual, and justified the gulag, the famine, and the purge as necessary steps on the path to paradise. Evil was committed not by monsters who saw themselves as evil, but by idealists who saw themselves as the sole bearers of good. This is the danger of inflation. It makes us morally blind. When a group is inflated, it loses the capacity for self-reflection. Any criticism is not seen as valid feedback, but as a heretical attack, a blasphemy. The group becomes impermeable to reality. The leader of this inflated group often functions as the focal point for this archetypal identification. He is no longer a politician. He is the savior, the father of the nation, and his followers, fused with this energy, feel they are participating in something numinous, something divine. They surrender their individual consciousness in exchange for this feeling of belonging to something great. The collective shadow, in this scenario, is projected with absolute force. The world is divided into a Manichean black and white, those who are with us the light, and those who are against us the darkness. And as Jung reminds us, the worst thing we can do to our fellow man is not to hate him, but to believe that we are in no way like him. Inflation makes us believe we are not like the other evil. It tells us we are fundamentally different, and in doing so, it gives us permission to do anything. The antidote to inflation is humility, the tragic but necessary awareness that, as Solzhenitsyn said in the Gulag Archipelago, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart. A group that forgets this is on the brink of the abyss. If you think the collective shadow is a concept relegated to past world wars or totalitarian regimes, you are not paying attention. The collective shadow is alive and well, and it has found a new and powerful playground, the digital world. Social media, with its algorithms, did not create the collective shadow, but it is, perhaps, the most perfect projection accelerator ever invented by humanity. What we see today as extreme political polarization is, in fact, a symptom of a deepening collective shadow. The digital environment works in ways perfectly aligned with the shadow's worst instincts. First, it offers anonymity or semi-anonymity. The digital mask, the profile persona, allows us to dissociate our actions from our real identity. We can be crueler, more dogmatic, more enraged online, because the digital self doesn't seem to have the same responsibility as the physical self. The shadow is unleashed. Second, algorithms create filter bubbles. They are designed to keep us engaged. And nothing engages us more than the validation of our own ego and indignation against the other. The algorithms, therefore, feed us content that reinforces our worldview, the light, and show us the worst. Most cartoonish versions of the other side, the projected shadow. We never see the other in their human complexity. We see only the monstrous projection the algorithm selected to enrage us. The result is mass digital hysteria. The other side is no longer seen as a group of fellow citizens with different ideas. They are invariably evil, stupid, traitors, or inhuman. They are the perfect scapegoat for all our anxieties. The economy is bad. It's their fault. Culture is collapsing. It's their fault. The collective shadow of each side is projected onto the other with a ferocity that permits no dialogue. Canceling is the digitalized scapegoat ritual. It is the banishment to the symbolic wilderness of social irrelevance. The virtual mobbing is the group's false catharsis, feeling virtuous by destroying someone who failed to adhere to the dogma. We are living in a digital coliseum where we watch and participate in the daily sacrifice of scapegoats to appease a collective anxiety we do not know how to name. And what we do not name is our own shadow. What we truly fear is not the other side. What we fear is our own incompetence, our own insignificance, our own hypocrisy. It is far easier to participate in a holy war of tweets than to do the quiet, painful work of confronting our own contradictions. If this content is making you reflect on how we navigate this complex environment, consider subscribing to the channel. We need more spaces for introspection, not just reaction. The digital collective shadow is loud, and only individual consciousness can bring any silence. If the collective shadow is so powerful, if it infiltrates our systems, our politics, and now our algorithms, how can we even know it exists? Who forces us to look at the mirror we have all agreed to cover? In the collective psyche, this role is often played by a specific archetype, the trickster, the fool, or the artist. This is the inconvenient witness. The court jester was the only person in the kingdom allowed to tell the truth to the king. Hiding behind the mask of comedy, absurdity, and madness, he could point to the king's inflation, to the court's hypocrisy, to the kingdom's collective shadow. He was the outsider who saw what the insiders, trapped in their own personas of power, could not see. The authentic artist fulfills the same function. Great art, whether in literature, film, or painting, does not exist to comfort us. It exists to disturb us. It exists to rip the veil of consensual reality and show us what lies beneath. The artist is one who voluntarily dives into the collective unconscious, confronts the archetypes, and returns with a report. This report is often the image of the shadow that society refuses to see. Think of Orwell's 1984 or Huxley's Brave New World. These are artists pointing to the collective shadow of utopia and control. Think of the comedians who, with one joke, expose the absurdity of a prejudice we all tacitly accept. Society has an ambivalent relationship with these figures. We love them and we fear them. We celebrate them and, just as often, we censor, exile, or kill them. The artist who shows the shadow is often confused with the shadow. The prophet who points out the sin is accused of being the sinner. This happens because the collective shadow, when confronted, reacts with violence. It does not want to be seen. The group, comfortable in its illusion, turns against the inconvenient witness. The artist is called degenerate. The intellectual is called a traitor. The comedian went too far. These reactions are, in fact, proof that they have touched the exposed nerve. They have found the shadow. In our age of polarization, this role is more dangerous than ever. The collective shadow of each side demands absolute loyalty. The fool who dares to criticize both sides, who points to the hypocrisy on both the left and the right, is attacked by everyone. He is tribeless, But it is precisely this tribalist position, this outsider status, that is necessary for true consciousness. The job of the fool, the artist, is not to give us answers. It is to ask the questions the collective shadow forbids. It is to force us to laugh at our own deadly seriousness. It is to remind us, through absurdity or tragic beauty, that the line between good and evil truly does cut through the heart of every one of us. We are facing the most difficult question. If the collective shadow is the cause of our greatest suffering, war, prejudice, hysteria, what do we do about it? Is it even possible to integrate the shadow of an entire nation? The Jungian answer is difficult. The individuation process of a single human being is the task of a lifetime. The individuation of a collective is a Herculean task, perhaps even an alchemical work spanning generations. There is no five-step solution. There is no public policy that can solve the shadow. Anyone who promises this is, in fact, succumbing to psychic inflation. However, there are paths. There are processes that point in the direction of integration. Even if they are painful and imperfect, what would a social alchemy look like? First, it would require acknowledgement and mourning. Think of the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, like the one in post-apartheid South Africa. These were not perfect processes, but their premise was psychologically sound. The shadow, the crimes of apartheid needed to be brought into the light. The perpetrators needed to confess, and the victims needed to bear witness. The shadow was not swept under the rug. It was named publicly. This does not heal the wound, but it stops it from festering in the dark. Collective integration would also require the end of the scapegoat mechanism. This means society must stop looking for others to blame and start taking responsibility. At the level of justice, this looks like restorative justice, which focuses less on punishment, which is often just the shadow acting in a legalized form, and more on repairing the harm and reintegrating both the offender and the victim into the community. It is a process that forces everyone to acknowledge their part in the whole, their complicity in the system. Integration also requires rituals. The collective shadow, being archetypal, does not respond well to reason and data alone. It responds to symbol, to myth, to ritual. We need memorials that not only celebrate our victories, the nation's persona, but that also mourn our failures and atrocities, the nation's shadow. The Holocaust Memorial in Berlin is a powerful example. It is a nation's shadow made concrete, a physical space for guilt and memory, impossible to ignore in the center of the capital. But in the end, the collective shadow cannot be integrated from the top down. A government cannot decree. Integration, social alchemy, is ultimately the aggregate result of countless acts of individual alchemy. The collective shadow only lessens its grip when a sufficient number of individuals within that society begin to do their own shadow work. When individuals stop projecting their anger onto their neighbor, their inadequacy onto their boss, their malice onto the political other. It is slow, painful, and deeply personal work. It is not a loud political revolution. It is a quiet revolution of consciousness. One person at a time. We have reached the end of our journey, and the path leads us back to the beginning. We started with the vastness of the collective shadow, the darkness that moves nations and topples empires, and we end, as Jung always ended, with the individual. The collective shadow, with all its seemingly impersonal power, is a golem made of our own abdicated darkness. It is composed of millions of small, individual projections, of millions of refusals to look in the mirror, of millions of moments when we chose the comfort of other blame over the pain of our own. Responsibility. The temptation is to look at the world, at the polarization, at the war, at the hatred, and feel overwhelmed, small, and powerless. The temptation is to ask, what can I, one individual, do against a monster of this magnitude? The Jungian answer is paradoxical, yet profoundly empowering. The only thing you can do is the only thing that matters. The only antidote to the collective shadow is individual consciousness. Your work is not to change the world. Your work is to change your world. Your work is to do, with absolute courage, what the entire society refuses to do. Withdraw your own projections. When you feel that rush of righteous hatred for the other side, stop. Ask yourself, what part of myself am I seeing in them? What shadow of my own is being activated? When you feel superior, morally inflated, ask yourself, Where is my own capacity for evil that I am so conveniently ignoring? This work is the opus magnum, the great work of the alchemist. It is transforming the lead of your own personal shadow into the gold of consciousness. And why does this matter to the collective? Because consciousness is contagious, just as unconsciousness is. An individual who integrates their shadow stops feeding the golem. They no longer offer their anger, their fear, or their hatred to the collective fire. They become a circuit breaker in the mass hysteria. They become someone who, as Jung described, is capable of bearing the tension of the opposites within himself. They do not need a scapegoat because they have accepted the darkness within themselves. They do not need a holy war because they are busy with the battle within their own psyche. The collective shadow thrives on unconsciousness. It dissolves before the light of individual consciousness. Your responsibility is not to carry the light for the world, but to carry the light in you. In a world that demands you pick a side, that you shout, that you hate, the most radical act of rebellion is to be silent, to look inward, and to do your own work. This is the true responsibility of the light. This is the only way. Thank you for joining me on this profound journey. If this reflection has brought value to your understanding, I ask that you subscribe, comment with your own perspective, and share this video, not to create more noise, but to invite more people into this necessary introspection.